What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/ProRevenge. This story's called Horrible Teacher Fails to Do His Job, So We Got Him Fired. Hello, fabulous Reddit peeps! I've been contemplating posting this story on here for a while now, but life just kept getting in the way. So here we are. Finally. Quick note, the majority of this took place when I was around 16. Also, this is a long story, just a fair warning. When I was in secondary school, I had a teacher, Mr. Geller for the sake of this post, who absolutely hated me. He was pretty popular with the cool kids at school. He'd stop teaching to talk to them, joke around, and generally act like one of the kids in the class rather than the teacher, which is fine, I guess, apart from the fact that he was so busy joking around with the popular kids that he'd fail to actually teach his class properly, and our work would suffer because of it. Over half his class failed their exams, and the other half, bar a handful of students who were really good at the subject, managed to just barely pass after going to a bunch of tutoring classes in the weeks running up to the exam. I genuinely don't know how he managed to keep his job for so long. I had, and still somewhat have, some pretty severe anxiety issues, to the point where I'd sometimes not go to school due to the panic attacks. I was never bullied by any of the students, but just the thought of being surrounded by a bunch of loud, hyperactive students was enough to make me physically ill. As a result of this, I would often be allowed to work in one of the pupil support bases, essentially a small room that I could work in by myself and would receive support from one of the learning support teachers if needed. This also allowed me to leave a class, with permission from the teacher of course, if I was having a particularly bad day, and go to the base to calm down and complete my work. Mr. Geller was not a fan of this. Whenever I would ask him if I could go to the learning support base, he'd always tell me no, and then mock me in front of everyone about how this was the reason I was failing his class. I was just barely scraping passing his class. However, most of his class were in the same boat as me, and again, like me, the majority of them were doing pretty well in their other subjects. This was clearly down to his teaching ability, nothing else. My boyfriend, Alex, and a handful of other seniors would be in my class once or twice a week, and would often help explain things to myself and some other students if we were struggling, essentially doing Mr. Geller's job. This wasn't fair, as they had to neglect some of their own work to act like a teacher. Mr. Geller would again use this to mock me in front of the class, saying things along the lines of, "Now you boys make sure you keep your hands to yourselves," or "We can continue the lesson when the lovebirds decide to stop their flirting and pay attention." I know it seems trivial now, but at the time it was humiliating, as he never called anyone out other than me, and having the whole class essentially point and laugh at me and Alex, though they probably didn't mean any harm, was enough to make my anxiety skyrocket. I dealt with his behavior for months. The snide comments, mocking me in front of everyone, standing behind me when I was trying to work, and scoffing about how awful my work was, stopping in the middle of a lesson to lecture me if I wasn't taking enough notes for his liking. I dealt with it all. My mental health was a wreck. The thing that finally broke me and made me decide to finally do something about it was when he failed me in one of my tests because I apparently cheated off of Alex, who, might I add, was doing an advanced higher class, not the National 5 course we were doing. He was on a completely different topic from me, so there was no way I could cheat by looking at his page, and he was sitting 5 tables away from me. I physically couldn't cheat off of him if I wanted to. At this point, I was pissed. An emotional wreck, yes, but pissed. Alex and I decided to get back at this disgrace of a teacher. Now for the revenge. I wasn't entirely sure how to go about this at first. Alex suggested reporting him to the head teacher, but if that happened, then everyone would know it was me. I didn't want to be the one that reported a popular teacher. Kids can be cruel. So Alex and I, and a couple of Alex's friends, came up with a plan. Alex and his friends were not pleased with having to do a bunch of extra work to keep on top of their work, as they were too busy being ignored by Mr. Geller and teaching his class for him. Plus, they were leaving at the end of the year, so if it fell back on them, then there really wasn't a whole lot anyone could do about it. Alex and his friends started recording all of their lessons on their phones. Mr. Geller joking around with his favorite students instead of teaching, telling Alex and his friends to help each other when they needed something explained to them, and having them essentially taking the place of teacher in his class. They also managed to record a couple of instances where Mr. Geller accused me of attention seeking when I asked to go to the student support base, after finishing all the work he'd said in the class. This went on for weeks. We all met up and sorted through the recordings, made sure that we'd collected enough evidence. It was a long, grueling few weeks, but we managed. We'd been dealing with it for months. We could last a few more weeks. One of Alex's friends suggested that I try to do my work elsewhere as much as possible, so that I couldn't be blamed for the recordings. So I did. There was a few raised eyebrows, but I was still getting my work for the class done. I had to do extra work at home to keep on top of it, but I had to do that anyways. Whilst I had some time to myself, both in the base at home, I essentially stalked Mr. Geller's social media. It wasn't too hard to find. I couldn't find a whole lot on his social media. The only thing worth noting was his friends list. He had all his favorite students on his social media. I couldn't find a whole lot of stuff that he'd been tagged in or anything, though I did scan through the students' profiles and found that he'd commented on a lot of their posts. Most of it was harmless banter, but there was a few comment threads that I found he was talking crap about some other students. He made fun of a boy whose mother was a recovering alcoholic, a girl with dyslexia, and a girl who had reported a couple of the popular kids for bullying her. This is just to name a few. I was in the list of students he'd like to make fun of when he thought no one would notice. It did a number on my anxiety seeing my classmates and teachers saying these things, but I pushed through and read them all. I decided to screenshot whatever I could find and sent it to Alex. I also took the screenshots of all the disgusting things he was saying about the other students and emailed them to their parents, or whatever parents I could get the email addresses of. Needless to say, they were not happy. After we gathered enough evidence, we sent an email to the head teacher with everything attached. We never got all the details on what happened to Mr. Geller, but we do know that the head teacher got some higher-ups involved. We're still not 100% sure if he decided to resign or if he was fired. All we know is that after the summer holidays, we had a new teacher. And surprise, surprise, she actually knew how to teach a class. I heard through a friend that Mr. Geller managed to get a job at another school a couple hours away, but that job didn't last very long. He either quit or was fired. He hasn't worked as a teacher since. According to his Facebook profile, he no longer has a wife. Rumor is that his marriage fell apart after he lost his job, though I'm not sure how true that is. Hopefully, he's a better person now. I highly doubt it though. So that's my story of revenge. I'm not sure if it counts as pro-revenge, but my friend suggested I post it here, so I'm doing just what she says. Hope you guys are having a good day and staying safe. Bye. Okay, I've known many teachers like that, but they usually do a good job at teaching the class when it's needed. Like, they usually do the chatting and stuff with the students after the lesson, and it's usually the students that engage it, almost always. So, but this guy definitely was not a very nice teacher, talking crap about some students. He obviously had favorites, and that's not a cool thing. This story's called My Sister and the R Word. This happened far too long ago, but I saw something about a sister and remembered this. My middle sister was a pain in the ass. She used to try to beat me up and make me angry so she could blame her actions on me. This was the mid-70s. Jesus. And the R word was common usage. I never did like it though. My sister loved it and used it every chance she got. It was her go-to for scorn and insult. Side note, she wasn't that bright. Once when she had to go someplace new, she was afraid she'd get lost. We assured her that if she got lost, we would call her. She felt better about it. So after a month or 3 of the R word, my oldest sister and I got fed up. We sat down with a bunch of paper and started making signs, like 30 of them. Then we placed them all over the house. They were along the lines of, take an R word to lunch, have you hugged your R word today? R words are people too. We placed them everywhere we could think. Under the toilet seat, inside the medicine chest, in her clothes drawer, on the ceiling above her bed, under her pillow. We looked places that would take a few days to find. We always knew she'd found one because she let out the most lovely howl of "Mom!" after each one. Talking to my mom a long time after, she said she felt so torn as to how to handle it. On the one hand, she couldn't just let us get away with it, but on the other, she was tired of hearing it, and she almost broke out laughing when the time came to talk to us about it, and she never called us the R word again. I didn't think it was an issue up until like 2013 when they took retardation out of the DSM-5, I think, and it was replaced with intellectually disabled. This is what my psychology teacher told me back in junior year, or senior year, I'm not sure. But I didn't really think it was like an ethical issue back then, or even just up until recently. This story's called Student Steals Parking Sticker, Gets Expelled. Hi folks, I live in Iowa. My father is a professor at the University of Northern Iowa. We have a parking system at University of Northern Iowa, and it starts with A stickers, which professors, staff, graduate assistants. Well, technically we have a G sticker as well, but it's kind of useless and only given out in a lottery system. Below A is B and C. Each parking lot has a huge sign that tells who can park where. My dad, the absent-minded professor, often forgot to lock his car, and one day he called me to ask if I had borrowed it. I told him no, and he started to freak out. Background about me. I went to college for security and private investigations, but was working at the time as loss prevention. I only lived a few blocks away from his office and knew he would be raging and going a little off the wall at the indignity of having his sticker stolen. When I got to the building, I went up to the 6th floor and to his office. He was busy calling other professors asking them if they saw anything. I asked if he called campus police and he said no. Facepalm moment. I told him that's where we needed to start because they have the tag number, and as classes don't get out for another hour, we should have time to check all the A parking lots. He looks at me and says, "How do you know this?" I say, "Dad, this is what I do for a living. People steal things and I track them down. I'm especially good at catching employees." They make our way to public safety and explained what happened. They said they didn't have the time to track it down, and I said no worries, that's why I'm there. We went back to the parking lot with the tag number and started walking down the rows looking at all the tags hanging from the rear view mirrors. I found the car 4 rows over and 3 slots west. Dad called campus police and an awesome officer arrives and matches the tag to my dad. Not this car. Class was due to get out in about 5 minutes, and we elected to wait for the thief and confront him. My dad is the epitome of you're only worth the deeds you do and takes everything very personal, and is the kind of professor you either love or absolutely hate. We wait for quite some time, making jokes and watching the students exit the building into the parking lot. I spot the thief first as he's walking to the parking lot, earbuds in, nose deep in his phone, when he glances up and sees us standing around his car. He stops mid-step and does an about face. I point him out to the officer, and the officer yells for the student to stop and talk. The student stops and turns around. The officer asked if this is his car. The student pauses, shrugs, and says yes. The officer asks him if he knew the tag was stolen, and he of course said no. The officer asks where he got it and what year he was. The student claims he's a sophomore and he bought it at the campus parking office. The officer says nope, impossible because you don't qualify for that tag. Where did you get it? He said he bought it from a friend this morning. Officer asked who the friend was and the student refuses. The officer says he's heard enough and that he needs to give the tag to my dad and apologize. He does so and thinks he's free to go. Nope. The officer then proceeds to write tickets. 1. Illegally parking. 2. Improper use of a parking tag. 3. Possession of a stolen parking tag. The kid's face is going from white to green at this point. He asks if he can leave and the officer says no. The officer has the car towed away at the student's expense. I ask the officer how much all that adds up to, and he says, after the towing, violations, and impounding, probably over $2,000. My dad only asks one question. What was that kid's name? The officer tells him. We all shake hands and go our separate ways. Dad and I go grab lunch, and I can tell he's not letting this go. I ask him what he's gonna do. He tells me he's going to send an email with the information to the other professors on campus, the dean of students, and overall just blast this kid off campus. I say, remind me never to steal from you. He reminds me that I had growing up several times, and it never worked out out for me either. We laughed. A few weeks go by and I ask Dad for an update. He tells me that the student was expelled 3 days after the incident and that I did a great job spotting and tracking down the student and tag. I said, Dad, I might not be a rocket scientist or teacher, but tracking people is what I do. That's it. Good times. Dad, if you read this, as I know you're a Reddit addict, we should grab lunch when campus opens up again. Aww, that's a cool story. Although I don't know if the kid should have gotten expelled, but he did steal something from someone's car. Then again, it was a parking sticker. So I don't know, there's different ways you can look at this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.